Hello and welcome to Unmuted. I'm your host, Courtland Warren. We'll begin this episode with a question. Is life happening to you, or is life happening for you? To you or for you? As you look at life events, experiences, situations, circumstances, where you find yourself currently, do you look at life and the events and experiences of your life as life is happening to you, or is life happening for you? How you answer that question can really determine whether or not you have a resilient mindset. Life happens with you, not to you. That's the case. You are a co-creator of your own life. When you realize this as your truth, you're on the path to having a resilient mindset as you begin to see that every situation in your life is an opportunity to have a human experience, meaning to grow and learn and become the best version of yourself. When you do this, when you take on life is happening for me or life is happening with me, then your life becomes richer, it's fuller, it's more meaningful, and it's more gratifying as a result. It is the path to a life of fulfillment. In today's episode, we'll be using a lot of the frameworks that I've been studying in or through Eva Selhab and her work on resilience. That said, let's take a look at some of the questions that you can ask yourself in order to evaluate how you look at life or how you answer that question. And some of you have been following for a while, and so you know that the right answer, the intellectual answer is, well, of course, life is happening for me and not to me. That's the correct answer, but does your life demonstrate that you really embody this idea? And so there are some questions for reflection that you can ask yourself, and if you do so honestly, it will reveal how you are truly living out your answer to this question. Now, if you find that you aren't really embracing this idea, not to worry. There are some solutions that are available that'll move you closer to a resilient mindset. And so let's look at some questions, and you just, as you're listening in, ask yourself how you would respond to these questions, okay? So we'll start with, in your life and life experience, do you tend to feel victimized when life knocks you down? When you're faced with adversity and challenge, is it something that you feel has happened to you? When stress accumulates in your life, how do you feel about your life? Do you get overwhelmed, anxious, dispirited? Are you easily annoyed and agitated? Or when it happens, do you take a deep breath, take better care of yourself, and then, like you're recharged, refueled, and it's like, okay, let's go, let's take it on. And maybe you feel both of those, and some real insight into how you're operating is, how long does it take you to shift to the attitude of, all right, let's go. So you'll see a lot in my social media posts where, I'll end it with let's go. Let's go is not just a hype statement. It really is about embracing the idea that, yes, adversity, challenges, obstacles, hurdles are coming, and how quickly can we move to face it, move through it, in order to create that life of fulfillment. Do you tend to get angry easily? Or do you look at it when someone says something that, do you take offense? Do you look at feedback as offensive? Do you take feedback as a personal attack? Do you tend to inwardly withdraw or shut down when you feel upset or overwhelmed? How come? What is really going through your mind? And I can attest to this one. All right, this is, when I get feedback or some information without context, I have noticed a tendency, or there's a period, and sometimes still to a degree, I have this tendency to immediately apply it to some personal attack. If you want to understand, if you don't believe the power of words, then read a letter, a note, a text where someone is you think that someone is disparaging you, and watch how that can shift your attitude or emotions. Do you tend to blame others for misfortune, or do you blame yourself when something goes wrong? Are you looking at others or at yourself when things don't go the way you thought they should be? Do you look for the meaning from difficult situations? How quickly do you turn to, okay, well, what is the lesson that can be learned, or what can I gain, or what's the lesson that's being taught? When something goes wrong, do you try to learn from your mistakes, or do you beat yourself up about it? See, intellectually, we can say, well, I know that it's not going to be perfect. I know that it's likely not going to go the way I wanted it to go. But when that happens, do you blame yourself for it? Do you become even more self-critical? When you describe yourself, would you describe yourself as a worrier? Not warrior, worrier. Or do you see yourself as a calm, like problem solver? Do obstacles cause you to want to give up, or do they motivate you to want to work even harder? When you find yourself challenged, are you excited about the opportunity to test what you've come to know? Or do you feel yourself down and disparaged and oftentimes losing hope? I was in a golf tournament this past weekend with some of my buddies, and in that tournament over 2 days, there were times when I hit shots that I didn't want to hit. And I remember a period of time where that would happen, and I would think to myself, okay, now it's over, I've lost it all, and that would spiral downward. And one of my arch nemesis, my rival, his name is Mose, or I call him Mose, and he actually shared with me today, after the tournament was over, he said, man, you played well. I kept waiting for you to falter, because he has seen that. He said, I kept waiting for you to falter, and you never did. And I let him know. I said, man, I haven't been playing golf nearly as much. I haven't been playing or practicing as much as I would like. I was a little nervous about coming into the tournament. But what I've been doing over the last several weeks is mentally looking at how I respond to difficulty and challenge, and what happens when I don't hit the shot that I really wanted to hit. And I've actually found greater peace on the golf course, and it definitely worked this weekend. So for you, do obstacles cause you to want to give up, or do they motivate you to want to work harder? And then another question you ask yourself for answering if whether or not life is happening to you or for you is, do you focus on problems and what is wrong, or do you focus on building solutions? I believe it was Eleanor Roosevelt who said that small minds talk about other people. Average minds talk about the problem. Great minds are focused on the solution. Look at that for yourself, and also your sphere of influence. What is common conversation among your friends, your peers, people you hang out with? How much of that time is talking about other people and the lives of other people and what they have going on in their relationship or business? Did you hear about so-and-so? Or is that time spent on what's happening in the world, what's wrong with the world, what needs to be, ought to be, should be? Or is the time that you are in conversation with other people spent focused on solution? You see, how you perceive yourself influences how you experience your life, and more so like how you handle uncertainty and adversity. If you are a person who perceives yourself as life is happening to me, that's victim consciousness, or broken or unworthy or lacking, then you're less likely to handle adversity and traumatic events and experiences effectively and adaptively, meaning you're able to move through it quickly. You're more likely to cast blame and complain or withdraw, hindering your ability to solve problems. Ultimately, it keeps you from succeeding and being your best self. So if you perceive yourself as whole, valued, capable, deserving, worthy, then the reverse happens. You actually experience life as like this journey. You're not so focused on the destination because you realize that by being focused on the destination, you miss the process of becoming. You miss the enjoyment of becoming and experiencing the fullness of who you are. You recognize that life is one that will have its ups and downs, and no matter the circumstance, you have the ability to influence the outcome and therefore your own reality. Why? Because you can shift your attitude. Really, Man's Search for Meaning, the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, really goes into that. And again, I encourage you to, if you're looking for greater information on this, I really don't like the For Dummies series of books, because I think that at some level I would be like calling myself a dummy. But the book Resilience for Dummies by Eva Selhub, right? It's a great one. It is a very practical guide for building up your resilience, and it's definitely one that I study. I wish that Resilience for Dummies is the name of the book, and let me surrender to that. See, that would be an example of me being in resistance to what is. Okay, all right. So, within like those neural pathways of your mind, there are many stories that exist, and they fall into one of two categories: the story of why you essentially are no good and undeserving and you are unworthy, or the category of, the story of why you're nothing and you're, anything, you're short of being amazing. Or there are those pathways that promote, I am worthy, I am deserving, I am capable, I am loving, I am loved, and that my past experiences and those events have shaped who I now am. Think about how that different context, and if you've been following the podcast, we've already covered how thoughts become things, and that what you see in your life is an outpicturing of what your most predominant ways of thinking have been. The positive stories that you tell are the tales of greatness, of you as being triumphant, how you move through difficulty, your accomplishments, and the truth about your value and your worth. But unfortunately, it's like the negative stories that usually win out during the hard times. So when times are difficult, when you find yourself disappointed, things didn't go the way you wanted them to go, we oftentimes collect greater or more evidence of why that event or experience of the disappointment actually is accurate and it's the truth. So during adversity and challenge, it is so important that you are equipped with a mindset or the mental or the internal dialogues that support your growth and expansion. Limiting beliefs are like these convictions that restrain you in some way. They're essentially like the fallacies that you believe based on past experiences, and they keep you stuck and unable to move forward. So, for example, you may have had a disappointment in a relationship, like a heartbreak, and since then decided, well, I can't trust anybody. So you throw yourself into your work and you avoid relationship or commitment in relationship because you can't risk having your heart broken again. I had a participant one time who shared, she said, I want to be in love. Yes, I do. I really do. I want love and intimacy and relationship. But the truth is, I am not convinced that I could bounce back again if I had to go through another heartbreak or disappointment. And it really stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, I felt that I understood exactly what she was talking about. Because it was like, well, those are the things that I want. I would like that. But the risk of heartbreak, the risk of disappointment, and all that it took for me to move through that, I'm not so sure that I could overcome that again. And so, you know what, let me just focus over here. So let's like just kind of look at and examine then that particular example, okay? Because that example of, well, I can't trust anybody, that limiting belief is rooted, and in order to take control of your mindset, if it is true that thoughts become things, and if it's true that everything is energy, and the highest form of energy is thought, and that thought becomes things, then we got to be willing then to do the work of exploring our most predominant ways of thinking. And as we begin to really explore it, there are some questions that we must be willing to ask ourselves. Number one, what is the underlying belief? And as you identify that, then the next phase is it logical or true? And then thirdly, what does holding on to this belief actually accomplish? So what is the belief? Is it logical or true? What does holding on to it actually accomplish? So person experiences heartbreak and all right, well, I can't, as a result of that, I can't trust anybody. So we look at that. So, well, what's the underlying belief? And does that underlying belief, does it support seeing growth, taking risk, seeking opportunity, or does it promote the opposite? Does the statement, I can't trust anybody, does it encourage you to feel empowered and confident, or does it lead you to be insecure and stressed out? Then you got to look at it. Okay, well, is it logical or true? Is it true that you can't trust everyone? Is it true that you can't trust everyone? Right? I mean, your close friends, your family, everyone? I mean, that's a pretty bold statement. No one to be trusted. I'll dare I say that if there's nobody that you can trust, that's not all the other people. What you really don't trust is yourself. And back to her point, which I related to, was what you're really not trusting is your ability to come back from a feeling of betrayal, disappointment, heartbreak, letdown. But you got to ask yourself, is it actually a logical statement? I can't trust anyone. It's not logical, nor is it true. And then we look at the third phase of that. Then what does holding on to that belief actually accomplish? Does that belief keep you safe and prevent you from being hurt? Does this belief prevent you from feeling rejected, unwanted, unloved? See, so if you don't allow yourself to trust anyone, then people do what they do. And when you feel some disappointment or level of betrayal, you're not all in. And so therefore, there are less pieces for you to pick up. Does that make sense? Am I communicating that? So if the thought or the assumption isn't true or logical and is based in fear, then it's likely a false or limiting belief. Now, mind you, if the thought is true and logical, it's usually a valid belief that is meant to limit you from the action so that you keep yourself safe. Like knowing that it's a bad idea to go swimming in freezing cold water. Well, okay, that's okay. Well, hold on, because if I go swimming in freezing cold water, I could freeze and die. So the difference between a limiting belief is that that distortion of what is true, and the latter is actually true. Okay, let me restate that because I got a little jumbled there on my words. Okay, so the difference between a statement that is logical and true is that it actually will keep you from taking an action that could have you in danger. Whereas a limiting belief is an action that is not true, but keeps you safe, but also not growing and expanding. So the bottom line is this: a limiting belief limits you. You hold on to them because they keep you safe. The problem is, here's the catch, they also keep you from experiencing life and believing in your ability to bounce back from the adversities that make you stronger and better. So how you answer the statement, life is happening to me, life is happening for me, really does reveal if you're being guided by limiting beliefs so that it prevents you from experiencing difficulty and challenge, but they also keep you from growing. Or are they statements that are actually true and logical, and they're keeping you, from doing yourself harm? So ultimately what we have to then do is simply watch our words. I say simply, but it's not easy. We got to watch our words. And as you examine your assumptions and your beliefs, you pay attention to your word choices as you speak throughout your day. And notice whether you're making sweeping statements like generalizations, predicting a future that hasn't happened, being overly negative, labeling yourself a person or situation through negative emotions, but rather pay attention to your words or phrases so that you're able to discern if whether or not it's logical or true. Then see if you can reframe that statement. Okay, so let me give you some examples. So let's say then that a person is like in the conversation of like, I can't, right? I can't. Notice how many times you might say I can't, and then ask yourself whether that statement is factually true or logical, because making the statement sets limits on your abilities and your belief in yourself. So for example, the statement, I can't. Is it true or logical? It's like, well, as the person says, well, I can't go one more day. Okay, well, is it true or logical that you can't go one more day? Is it limiting in some way? It actually is, yes. It makes you sound weak and like you don't have what it takes to weather a storm. The underlying belief, I'm weak. So when a person is saying I can't, what they're really saying, the underlying belief of I can't is ultimately I'm weak. That belief is not a truth. The truth is that you can, because you are showing up every day. If you go back and look at your life, you look at your life and see that there everything that you know, everything that you are now, everything that you are able to do today, at one time you could not do it. And if you had applied that belief of I can't, you will have never moved through it. So we reframe it then through, this situation, instead of I can't, we reframe it with like, well, this situation is challenging and I'm amazed at my resilience. And it's going to push me to get through even another day of it. So I can't, based in, or the underlying belief is, I'm weak. Another way that people, if you're really to examine your conversations, are through verbiage like always and never. Always, never, like no one ever. All of those words are words that we use when we're making an all or nothing like statement that's rarely true or logical. It's highly, highly unlikely that you're like always late or that you never, ever get recognized. But making these types of statements, they and generalizations, they really just encapsulate your past, okay? And you lump all of that belief into one like category. But the belief isn't true. It isn't all true, and it also predicts a negative outcome. So therefore, if it's always this way, or never this, or no one ever, that generalization keeps you from moving forward, because it's like, well, why would I even attempt it if I always fail, if I always get let down, if I'm always disappointed, if I'm always betrayed? Then why would you set yourself up to step into that? So recognize that overall statement, that generalization, is one that's actually keeping you safe. It's actually keeping you comfortable, but it's not supporting you in moving forward. It does not support your growth. It is a general statement, okay? It's a general statement that keeps you in a fixed mindset. So watch words like I can't, words like always and never. Also, another one would be I can do that, but. Okay, I can do that, but. Now, often what will happen is, we'll qualify our accomplishments or our ideas with the word but. When you add but to a statement, you actually diminish the value of the accomplishment or the attribute or even your own contributions to making it happen. So changing the but to and adds value to the statement and enhances a more positive attitude and mindset. Some of you listening in will be like, oh, that's why. That's why we did that like 90-day game of but, can't, and try. Why? Because but, well, I can't is just limiting, period. But is a word that basically it removes everything said prior to it, and is also very diminishing. You know, so I can do that, but these types of statements come up when it's like, well, you know, I accomplished that, but it wasn't enough. So we look at it again. Is it true or logical? The statement may fall clearly into the true or logical category, though I could also ask myself, well, what do I mean by it was not enough? Enough of what? Enough for whom? Could I have done more given the amount of time I had? Or is it based on what you're seeing other people doing? So we go back to the law of relativity, which speaks to the fact that nothing is either good or bad, short or tall, you know, successful or unsuccessful until we compare it to something else or someone else. And oftentimes we use these unfavorable comparisons. So enough, or it wasn't enough, is evidence of an unfavorable comparison. So rather than recognize or see it for what it is, we relate it to something else or to someone else. And oftentimes when we relate in that way, we do so unfavorably, and as a result, we are diminished. Underlying the belief of I am not enough or that wasn't enough is the belief of I'm a failure. Not good enough is ultimately rooted in I am a failure. But is that the truth? Again, everything you've learned, you once didn't know it, you were persistent enough to stick with it. So then the reframe would be to look at what you did accomplish versus what you did not. So the whole idea is recognition of what are the conversations that you have with yourself. When the silence is so loud that you need the radio in your car. When the silence actually starts to scream, what a lot of people will look to do is drown out the noise of silence. It's an interesting wordplay, is it not? I got to drown out the noise of silence. Why? Because the internal dialogue becomes so difficult to navigate and manage. We go out and we'll look to busy ourselves so that we're not face to face with ourselves. This leads to a muted individual, one who silenced themselves by overcompensation to someone else's needs, wants, or desires, where we lose ourselves as we look to adapt to what someone else expects of us. So yes, I'm here, I'm now known, but I'm not really seen. And what happens is, because we are not living from what is the truth for us, we are looking for ways to be accepted or received by others who actually benefit from you playing less than, from you doing, or from you being from you shrinking or being small in their presence, so that they are now comfortable. I was reading a quote just I don't know, an hour or so ago, and it said, "We do all that we do to take care of other people, because in so doing, we heal the parts of ourselves where we wish someone had taken care of us." Check that out. That's pretty strong, is it not? Right? We take care of other people because it heals the parts of us where we wish that someone or the parts of us where we needed someone to take care of us. So when you find yourself being a person who just gives and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives and gives, and you give until it hurts, it's very likely that your giving is your attempt to heal and care for someone else in those areas or places where you wish someone had been there to take care of you. But ultimately, it doesn't work. Ultimately, it does not get you the result that you subjectively hope for and anticipate. It leaves you feeling depleted and exhausted, tired, unfulfilled. Additionally, it produces a fixed mindset. Life is happening to me or life is happening for me. When you begin to embrace that you are, in fact, never alone, you're not alone and you never have been, that life is operating on your behalf. This is my belief, that life is operating on your behalf, looking to reveal to you those parts of you that remain unknown so that you can be introduced to the splendor, the greatness, the beauty, the magic, and power of who you are. Recognizing that you are indeed a perfect expression of God's wonderful imagination. That's how I see it. That I am an expression of God's imagination. And so recognizing that that energy is, and it's in all places, there's nowhere that it's not. It cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only change form. Then whatever is happening is also a form of energy. How I view it is also a form of energy. What is present in my life is actually old news. The results of my life are actually old news because the results that I see are actually an outpicturing. It's a manifestation of what my predominant ways of thinking have been. So what I see in my life, what shows up in my life, is only a manifestation of what my predominant beliefs and thinking have been. So it's feedback, but it's old news. It's evidence of what I have been thinking up to that point, and that energy of my thought has it manifest now in my life. So if I want tomorrow to be different, then I begin by controlling the conversations that I'm having within myself. I'm mindful of my internal dialogue, and I recognize that my internal dialogue, my thoughts actually create, and that's the case for you. That we're always creating. It is a perpetual transmutation of energy. Your thoughts become things constantly. And so, verbiage like I can't, this is not enough, are all ways of actually staying in a victim consciousness. Maybe in a different podcast, we'll explore this idea of being victimized versus a victim consciousness. But just briefly, I'll say this. Victimized, that speaks to the event, the thing that happened. And I am not one to say that that no one is a victim, because I don't believe that. There are definitely those who have been victimized. That's the thing, the event, the experience. It's what happened. There's a difference between being victimized and having a victim consciousness. Victimized is the event. Victim consciousness, what I believe, my collection. A consciousness is essentially a collection of beliefs. Okay? So victimized is the event. Victim consciousness is the beliefs that I have as a result of that event or experience. What I believe about myself, other people, life, the world, that's victim consciousness. Victimized is the event, real event, it happened. Victim consciousness, I can control because it's based on the meaning that I assign to myself as a result of the event or the experience. So life is happening to me, life is happening for me. If you can get to the place where you recognize that it's all for growth and expansion, and you can interpret the events and the experience as that you can interpret the events and experiences of your life as being there to promote your growth and your fulfillment, then you can embrace it. Doesn't mean you want it. Let's be clear. We're not saying you want it. Doesn't mean that you deliberately go out and seek out the adversity and challenges. Doesn't mean you go out and that you're just a glutton for punishment. It's not what we're saying. But we cannot do anything that enables us to skip or be exonerated from a life that has adversity and challenge. It's going to visit everybody. So there's not anything that we can do to live a life where there are no challenges, where there is no adversity. So it doesn't mean that we go seek it out. It doesn't mean that we deliberately go create the drama so that we can have more of it. No, but when it arrives, make sure that you have done the work on yourself to interpret whatever you're being faced with in a way that leads you to seeing a benefit from it, such that you're able to move through it faster, so that you can go about the business of creating a life that is fulfilling and one that matters. Looking to avoid adversity and challenge, and only taking action when you know the outcome already, leads to a fixed mindset. One in which you embrace that life is happening for you, for your growth, for your expansion. That's the mindset of growth. So check in with yourself this week. Be mindful of your internal dialogue. Be mindful of your conversation with yourself. And we can do like the conversation with other people and so forth, but I'm most concerned about that conversation that you're having internally. And when you speak to yourself, do you speak to yourself and about yourself in a way that is uplifting? I said to someone recently, I said, it is because your image of me is less than my image of myself does not mean that I'm egotistical or narcissistic. Sometimes people hear these, these psychology, like terms, and they want to apply them to everybody without even fully understanding what it is or means. It is very likely that when you begin to do the work of transformation, how you begin to see yourself will not fit the label or the limits of those who are in your current sphere of influence. Why? Because those individuals match the frequency of vibration that you have been on. It was a frequency of vibration that attracted them into your life in the first place. So when you get committed to your work, when you get committed to transformation, when you get committed to doing what's necessary for you to grow, expand, and create a life that matters, understand that initially when you begin to do that, as you're growing and expanding, it becomes uncomfortable for those who are in your current sphere, because as you're tuning a new vibration, as you're moving to a higher frequency, it is reflective of them also. And so you may have to, for a period of time, do the work alone. You may, for a period of time, have to do the work by yourself. There may be less entertainment. Maybe the phone calls to go hang out become less and less. Maybe you hear feedback and comments like, oh, she thinks she's all that, and oh, he's doing too much now. You got to be willing to endure that and understand that that is not a reflection of you as much as it is their representation or justification for why they're unwilling to do the work that still has them where they are. And there's a peace that comes with that I am without words to describe. And it makes room, though. It makes room for others to begin to enter your life and fill the space that once seemed so empty. See life as happening for you. See life as being on your team. See life as being a benefit to you, your growth, and your expansion. See it that way. And when you do, your conversations, your internal dialogue will begin to shift. In fact, transform. You'll see opportunities differently. You'll be drawn to different experiences. You'll start to receive new and different invitations. Your environment will not only look different, it will be different. It's a path that not many are willing to take, but you're not the many. It's a life that most aren't willing to do, but you're not the most. It's a life that some aren't cut out for, but you're not some. You're unique. You're powerful. And what you're capable of is extraordinary. There is no reasonable room for debate on this fact. You are worthy and deserving of a life of meaning, one that matters, and one in which you are remembered. Someone's life will be better because you live here if you're willing to do that work. I hope that helps. If so, don't keep it a secret. Let someone know that this podcast exists. I appreciate that. If you haven't, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Courtland Warren YouTube channel. Join also the email list. You can do so by going to courtlandwarren.com, downloading the free ebook, Kaizen. When you do that, when you enter your email, that puts you on our mailing list. And so when I offer up email courses, webinars, you'll be the first to know. The reason why that's important is because I don't want to be dependent on platform. Every time they change an algorithm, I got to do something different to get your attention or have you even know that this information is available. So I use, or my desire is to use your emails instead. So having your email, it helps. So if you're willing to share, if you get value from this podcast or other previous podcasts, and as we move forward, then what helps is if you'll share your email address. And so you can email info@courtlandwarren.com or go to courtlandwarren.com, CourtlandWarren.com, and download the free ebook, and you'll be there. You'll have it. If you're listening to this podcast on the day that it is released, then we in 1 week on August 9th, free webinar, the Thought Shift webinar, made available free and for you to experience more of how to develop the ways of thinking that support you in having the life that you speak of or that you desire, and frankly, that you're worthy of. All right. So with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening, and press replay. I guarantee you'll hear something different. Play it a couple of times, and you'll hear something different, because this week was really speaking to me even in this moment. I'm kind of bouncing over my words a little bit. Is because I want you to do an exercise. I want you to work with this week. It is the most important thing. Why? Because everything is energy, and the highest form of energy is thought. And so this week, be mindful of the internal dialogue. Be mindful of what your thoughts are, particularly about yourself. Particularly about yourself. take note if whether or not the thoughts that you're thinking are fixed or are they of growth. The closer you move to growth, the more certain I am that you'll have a life unmuted, where you found your voice and you use your voice to create your world. Again, thanks for listening. Tune in next time.